Seems like it just about bites through this fast when it cooks it.
Hold on a second, Dad. Oh, see what I was gonna do? I was making this. So this goes.
So it's in on Joe.
I'm gonna have it go from here. It's gonna curve back and go up this arm to about right here or something.
Cut it off. Okay, and I use this other piece. The other piece is short enough. Go ahead and.
Here it's gotta be done up that way.
Or right here, you could bend it right here, that way. Wouldn't hurt to have one on there. Bleed out a little bit of the air out of that line.
Keep it on there.
Now I'm going to put another bead right down through here so that I won't hit it.
I think you're using 3 balls of Heat it up once from underneath.
I just want to catch on this back side a little bit. On the bead right there. I just thought I'd hit this one rod on it. But
That's got it.
okay. Now, let that be hot for a little bit. I don't understand this.
Alright, try this. Well, see, I got a strange curve in there and it's not wanting to catch onto it there. Helps if you use this extension on so it gets grip. See what I need? I need a bend right here going out that way. That's why it's catching on here. It needs to go up.
Yeah, you need to push it up just a little bit. Or you might have to put that pipe, one extra
It's
pipe
got
on, give
this
yourself
strange
leverage.
bend into it. Whenever I try to bend it, it goes towards the bend. See, it won't.
Let's try bending it from the other direction, maybe.
It needs a grinder, really.
Well, let's get the grinder out here and then.
always make sure you got a pair of one of these on.
Yeah, you don't want to grind it without safety glasses. All you need is a bunch of metal flying in your eyes.
You'd also probably want to wear a pair of long pants too. But it's entirely too hot out here to do that. Yeah, I got that little bend in there. I'm going to bend this into shirt. Should have no problem doing
Yeah,
that.
sometimes you put a little cut in there, it bends a whole lot easier.
Just like that. It's probably not deep enough yet. So you just keep doing this till you get it down to where you want it. Yeah. Oh, actually, this one. We don't have a hammer, do we, Steve?
Yeah, there's one inside in the
You
studio.
go grab that hammer. Well, I guess I can tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Eric Weatherholt. I've been by my father's side since the day I was that high doing artwork and sculpting and stuff. And
Actually, you were shorter than that. You decorated the door up there to my bedroom when you was 2 years old.
well, I guess I had it in me. But I'm a jeweler, so doing this, I can do a lot of this real good. So I got some sculpting influence through my father. We're all kind of artistically talented, and I hope we do a good job on this, because that's what I'm really looking forward to, is getting this done and looking good. But oh, there's the hammer. Okay.
Yeah, now you quit bragging on yourself and get to work, bud. Eric does a good job. He's an excellent sculptor. He kind of sells himself a little short sometimes. He gets his modesty from me, I guess. These extra heavy pieces are being put into the sculpture because we want them for support. When we add the plaster on these pieces, they pick up an awful lot of weight. And while we have the form in the way we want it, we still like to give a good sound structure to the whole piece, and that's why we're putting the heavy pipe in. Once that's brazed into position and bent to shape and it's all locked in, then we're pretty secure in the fact that that piece is going to stand there longer than we will.
I'm cutting the pipe, but what I'll do is when I go to weld this in there, I'll solder something either that's near that crack, or I might even solder it shut anyhow if it's open, just so that for the extra support. Right now I gotta make this cut a little deeper, because it's not anywhere close to where I need it.
I really believe that in the old days the apprenticeship program was really great. I think my kids benefit a whole lot from the fact that I try to pass down to them what I know, and there's a lot of this they couldn't learn in school. They couldn't learn it because so oftentimes it's programmed in schools to the slowest person that a lot of times it's hard to get somebody that's exceptionally good to give them the instruction as fast as they can take it. And with the kids, they've been able to absorb. They're like sponges in this respect, and being artistically inclined, that helps out a lot. I want to leave them with a little something that will see them through the rest of the years. Eric kind of goes from the ridiculous to the sublime. We're working on a pretty good sized piece here, and then he'll go to his job that he works 40 hours a week at as a jeweler, and he'll work with little tiny pieces of jewelry and all, so it's kind of a unique situation for me.
So here, I think I'll go ahead and grind this one too. Now doing this takes some time, but it really pays off in the end for making sure this thing doesn't get tore up and shit and cast procedures.
This is another thing I tried to teach the kids too. I think you can't substitute for quality. You've got to put it in as you go along.
Yeah.
Sometimes we work in our culture. Today everybody is, let's get it done, get it fast, make a dollar as quick as we can, and you know, it's fine. Money's fine, but it comes a point you have to have.
Take pride in it.
Right, you got to have that pride. This thing will stand longer than we will, and
it's too bad too, because that's kind of what this nation was founded on.
Right. It's one strange thing, you know. We spend all our time creating something that we want to last 1,000 years, and what's so funny, we'll take the money we make off of it and we'll buy things that will be designed to fall apart within 3. Of course, here are good ones for recycling as far as that goes. You notice these tables we're working on. My stepdad, Dr. Maynard Pike, he's really a terrific guy. He gave me a hand and did most of the constructions on these tables because we got the material from a local company, Archer Daniel Midland Company. They're a big company. I get a lot of scrap metal from them and so on and so forth. And they've been very good to support the arts in the community. They're just a fantastic company. They're a supermarket to the world, and they let me go out and raid their metal scrap pile every once in a while. And these were metal walkways that you see here, and we welded them together to make tabletops, and they're just ideal because snow and rain and everything pass through them, and yet they give a really good sound work table.
Hopefully this is about the last bend in this thing.
You notice most of our work is done just by sight, and I guess you'd call it by guess and by golly, but we know where we're going. We don't pre-measure for bends. We just have an instinctive knowledge where we want to bend it, and we follow along. It makes it easier than sitting down and trying to plan out inch per inch where we're going to put the bends.
Ooh, that wind feels good.
I think it's coming off a storm. We'll probably get rained out here in a few minutes. We realize that what will happen, these will be plaster sculptures when we get done with them. These plaster sculptures will be a work of art in themselves. We'll make the molds off of those at foundry, However, we don't want the plaster sculptures to fall apart, and this is why we're going to extra pains to make sure that the pieces are really soundly structured. And when you worked with bronze, as I have, and you've worked with wax and so on and so forth, you know that whatever you put there, when it ends up, it's going to be there. So you want to make sure that it's the best job you can do.
I'm about ready to make the last cut on this thing, then it'll be all ready to go in there.
Getting ready to braze that on there now, huh? Pick up a little flux there and heat your pipe somewhere.
Can you see from over there?
Sure.
What I'm doing is just tacking this on so I can take this off and start putting some heavy welds on it. That's probably good. Probably not. That's okay, it won't take a second to fix.
What we do, we use the vice grips to hold it in position till we get a tack on there.
Oh, it didn't. It welded, it just hadn't cooled down yet. It's really biting me.
Sign it's going to rain. You see that smoke pouring out of that pipe that has a lot of oil inside it. It seems protective coating, and it have to be careful we don't breathe the fumes too much. Otherwise, we're liable to all run out of here just a little crazy.
Putting some flux on it here helps the solder flow. Actually, what it does, it keeps the metal from oxidizing as it kind of cleans the metal.
This is the figure of the little boy that's running and pulling the pigtail of the girl in front of him. In the background there, you'll see part of the studio, an extra wind I have for when I want to expand the studio, and my settling tanks, and a chair that has blown over from the wind, which is really gusting pretty good at times out here today. We have storm warnings out, and I believe they'll probably come together as the day goes on. See little pieces around the studio in the background there on the left hand side. You'll see a marble sculpture that I've been working on. It's close to finished. It's out of marble from Missouri. It has a buffalo head stylized on one side and an Indian head on the other side. It's up on a platform there where I worked on it, and I have alabaster at the foot of it, but I brought that from, where of all places, but Michigan. And what would look like a little scrap pile, but it's actually a little scrap pile. It's my metal that I use. Sometimes I pick up scrap odds and ends to do various pieces of sculpture with.
So what are you doing, Steve?
Well, right now I'm wrapping the piece. We've got the quarter-inch metal and everything welded together, and what I'm doing is going in, wrapping in here with a just common chicken wire, chicken fencing like you'd use on a chicken pen, and it's real easy to form.
That copper wire, that's copper 1/4 inch right in there, ain't it?
Yeah. But what we do, we're getting this kind of to the point where the metal meets plaster. You need a rough surface that's closer to the form. But you need this chicken wire. We go in and wrap it with plaster, and you need something to tie that plaster into. By the way, I'm one of Larry's sons, and when I'm not doing stuff like this, I'm an art director for the local newspaper, Herald and Review. We've got a circulation of about 50,000. So basically, I'm constantly doing artwork. So take pride in what I do. It's kind of nice to have your family's name in the newspaper once in a while, especially when you work there. But what I'll do is I'll go in and wrap this with this chicken wire. This chicken wire is pretty easy to form by hand. You can smash it and bend it, and it'll retain that shape. And what we've got here, this piece right here, is a little girl that's running, I believe. This is the one where the dog's pulling on her dress. You can see here I've gone in and wrapped the arms and basically wrapped the body. Like I said, this is what we tie our plaster into.
One thing you have to do, everything at this stage has to be done a little bit undersized, because by the time you add the plaster onto it, it's going to bulk out quite a bit. You can also see the board that's figure is attached to, how we've attached it down to the bottom. That gives us something stable to work with.
Now what I do, once I get an area wrapped, I'll go back in. This is just common stove wire. It's real flexible. You just go back in and start at a point and start wrapping it up. That helps secure it to the metal underneath. Like Dad was saying, you want to keep it kind of thin, because you don't want such a thin plaster shell that it doesn't have any strength or durability to it. I think artists kind of live for projects like this, because they're those kind of projects that'll be around a lot longer than you will. And I've got 4 youngsters of my own. And it's kind of nice to know that one day they can maybe take their grandkids or great-grandkids up there to see what their daddy had worked on.
That's one nice thing about having sons that are artists too, because you know, I can walk away from things and leave these guys go, and I don't really have to worry about them, because I've pretty well trained them, and we see things alike in a lot of ways. It shows up in our snow sculpture that we do in the years, and I've tried to teach them as much as I could about the various forms of sculpture, whether it's stone or metal, or, as this case, plaster intended for eventual bronze. And like I say, this is the type of thing I can teach them, and they have a very workable knowledge of it, where if I was to send them to school for it, I'm afraid that they wouldn't learn it near as fast, or they may not learn it the way I would like for them to learn it.
And you can see I'm kind of going through here and threading the stove wire in here to make sure that this chicken wire is actually hooked onto the metal frame underneath. And I'll eventually go back and just wrap the whole thing completely one time in chicken wire, kind of pull the chicken wire up against the metal as tight as I can get it. The nice thing about this stove wire, it's real flexible, and makes it real easy to thread through here. Now I'll probably have to go back and add a little more chicken wire for her hair. I think the nice thing about kind of not pre-planning too much as far as we're going by a model, but still you want to leave yourself a little bit of looseness, especially on a moving piece, or it becomes too stiff and rigid, kind of loses life.
Yeah, that's one thing we want this piece to really have a lot of life to it. You know, it's strange because a lot of people don't realize Michelangelo in his sculptures just really distorted a lot of the human figure, but when he did it, it came off looking so much more believable than if he had locked himself in. I think it's similar to where if you're doing a drawing of a house, you can make a mechanical drawing of a house and it will be very right, very precise, but it has no life to it, and yet you can take the same house and do a loose sketch of it and it just comes alive. And I think sculpture is a large part of the same way.
Yeah, I think a fine example of that's Michelangelo's piece we were talking about the other day.
Pieta.
Yeah. If you really look at it, the Madonna is gigantic in proportion to the figure's prize.
Oh yeah. And then he would have situations where the arm and the hands would be twisted, and if you look at him, it's beautiful. But if you tried to put your arm or your hand in that position, you would really ache. I mean, it would be sore. I mean, it's a position that you couldn't hardly get into. But visually, it just looks beautiful. So that's what you have to keep in mind. You won't want to be so locked in that you can't say, I know this is the way it's supposed to be, but if I do it this way, it looks great.
Now this is the welding and wrapping and everything. There, once you do them, you kind of look at it and it looks like another form of art. But this is kind of the work part, and after this stage, we get a little bit closer to the fun part, and that's the actual sculpting of the piece.
Of course, you know, the thing is, being sculptors, you leave yourself open a little bit. I had a fellow come over the other day, and I've done commission pieces for him before, and he commissioned me to do another piece because of these frames. He saw the skeleton, as you would, of the metal and all, and he just loved it. And he's a runner, and he wanted a welded metal piece for his home. And I said, sure, you know, we got it. And so now I've got another piece that I'll do as a result of this piece. People see a thing at a certain stage, and that comes in with flexibility of, you know, I like, we do realistic pieces. We're very, very, very realistic in what we do as a usually. But we are also open, we can do very abstract pieces. And I think this is a sign of a true artist. Personally, like I tell the kids, I say, you know, don't be so locked in with your likes and dislikes that you can't see something good in many forms of art. And I like abstract art. I like good abstract art just as well as I like good representational. We normally do representational. But in this case, this will become a welded metal abstract piece, similar to another piece I did for ADM company, where I get a lot of my metal from. And it'll be a lot of fun. It's also kind of interesting where people will see you work in a specific style or something, or get it to a specific point and say, I love it just like that. I did some deer one time for local organization, and I really liked the armature much better than I did the finished piece. To me, it just had a tremendous look to it. I would have been satisfied personally to stop there and say, hey, this is it, you know, this looks great. This will happen sometimes. You got that arm in there, don't you, Steve?
Yeah.
Always pays to wear good gloves when you're doing something like this, because you can
cut you right up.
That's right. Yeah, that is exactly right. You know, another thing, a side benefit of doing this piece, I had a group out here from the, some lady, local lady, received a grant to come out to my studio and bring children, they were grade school children, about 6th grade, 5th grade students that she had, from around the city to come out and to watch me work on this, and it was kind of fun. The kids come out and they got to watch and see how the sculpture is actually started and not finished, but at least get it underway, and I think this is really great. I think that's what's great about us videotaping a lot of this, is because, you know, I look back and I think, man, wouldn't it have been great, not to compare myself with Michelangelo, it wouldn't have been great to have videotapes of Michelangelo cutting out his sculpture. And it wouldn't have to have been programmed. It would just be just to watch him work and see him move the stone or do his drawings. I think that would be great. I think sometime maybe in years after I'm gone, maybe this will help some other young artists see how we go about doing things and give them a little bit of an idea, you know. Kind of helps when you pass on what you know.
Think we need to work on that plaster on that one that we got started?
Pretty quick. You know, one thing I'd like to show them though before we get too started is our, you know, we usually have a gallery out here that watches us. I don't know if Eric can get a picture of them or not, but I'll call them and see if they'll come.
They're our audience.
They're our very
Captive
critical
audience.
captive audience.
Velvet.
There they come. That's our Three Stooges. That's Red. There's Velvet, and
Sammy the Idiot.
Sammy is the Golden Retriever. The Brittany, a Black Lab, and a Golden. And they're very, very
Stupid.
astute. That's what we do. So
No,
they usually
they're
come out here and
smart.
let us know whether we're doing it right or not. Isn't that right, guys? Now watch Velvet. She's also a high jumper. Yeah, fat. Come on, Velvet. That's right, just killing Killing That's right. Okay, I think that's enough of those skills. Okay, we're probably next. I'll show you a piece over here, Eric. If we got a second, why don't we go over here and we'll show this piece of, over here that we had to make a little correction on and show you where we're at on it. Now this is a piece here. Now we've made carts that we can roll these on, so we can get them where we want them. You'll see this is extremely rough. We had this welded and we start wrapping it with plaster because we take a lot of this off. We remove a lot of this. It's very rough at this point. You can see a hat, you can see a mannequin face, you can see rough hands. They don't have as much plaster in some areas as they need. They have too much in other areas. But you'll notice right here, there's no plaster at all. And what happened, we decided that we had this arm coming down this way, which looked fine, but we decided that might be in the way of somebody that come around the fountain, that they might walk into it or hit themselves, so we decided to alter this area. So we went in here, we cut off the plaster, we broke the weld, cut the metal, we formed the arm, which will come around in front. It'll still, aesthetically, it will still work. We'll bring the elbow out, rewrap this, we'll fill this in, and you can see how really rough this plaster is. A lot of it is plaster that we'll take burlap and we'll dip burlap into plaster and we'll wrap around this. And after that, when we'll start adding plaster. Well, the way I like to sculpture it is we get it up to a certain point, then we'll take off with chisels, files, sanders, grinders, down to the area we want. So we get the form started. Then we can always add to and take away, and that's the point this piece is in here now.
It's nice to know that you know that you have enough confidence in yourself that you can always take away and add on some places and not have to worry about getting it perfect the first time around. And I think that's where a lot of people seem to get that feeling that they can't do it because they think that they should be able to do it the first time and make it just perfect. And you know, there's just nobody perfect. Nobody can do it that way. I'm sure Michelangelo had a couple sculptures he just wanted to throw up against the wall.
He had a lot
his
of them
times.
finished.
Yeah.
But they look good in the unfinished state. I mean, you can see the form and the shape and everything else. But anyway, we'll go inside here. I'll show you a piece in the studio. I laughingly refer to this as my studio, and it gets a lot of wear and tear. We have built many things inside here and outside. You see we're working outside now. I like to work outside as long as the weather permits because I'm just an outside type person. I like it, the kids like it, and we can keep our mess outside, which we get a little messy sometimes.
I think this is a fine example of messy.
Yeah, that's messy. That will all come off. You can see there how that won't stick to that. It'll peel off there quite readily. And it will. We'll catch it and pitch it into a little hole we have down here that we need to fill. So that'll work well for that. You'll also notice if you kind of look around, you pan around through here, there's a piece of sculpture behind Steve there that Eric was working on. There's another one behind that I was working on. That's an alabaster, and we got them to a certain stage, and then we got busy on another project. It's just around the artist studio, you'll find a lot of bits and pieces and things in various forms of finish and all. They usually always get completed at one point or another, but a lot of times you'll be working on a piece and you'll just lay it aside to work on something that requires your attention at the time. We're not setting anything aside for these pieces. We're going right ahead with them. Let me take you inside the studio though now and give you an idea of what this looks like when we get a little bit more plaster on it, how we work that.
Yeah, here we are inside the studio, and Dad and Eric's working a piece down a little bit. It's come along pretty well.
You'll see it's not really anywhere near completion, but we're starting to get a little form in it. And the face is nowhere near completion. Just starting to spot things in. This is the way we work a lot of times. You know, you don't finish up totally one area. We work on the hat, we'll work on this and that. You'll notice there's still a lot of rough plaster all over, which we'll bring down. Of course, these are sculptors' files that we use, and they really cut and bite into a piece. You can see it takes very little to move a lot of material. And when we get it down to the point we want it, then we refine, we'll texture, we'll get into fine details, we'll actually put in the facial features that'll be a lot more childlike, a lot more delicate. But at this point you can kind of get the idea. It's starting to take shape pretty good. You get a lot of dust in a project like this, because we keep the fan going if we're working inside. And I think you can start to see it's taking shape. You know, the eye here hasn't been opened up. This one's opened up there with too much. But we'll go back in. We'll fill holes. We'll shape the leader holes, the little leader holes, and then all where they look right. We want little bulges of clothing coming around, because we don't want this piece to be static and stiff when we get done with it. This is the figure of the little boy that will be standing in the fountain, and he'll be the little bubble blower. And I think he's going to be real cute when we get him done. You see, he's come quite a ways, and I hope you don't think that this is the finished piece, because it's far from the finished piece.
Yeah, and one of the benefits to working with plaster is you can work it and rework it. You can add and take away and add back. We've been using a lot of different tools as far as carving. Some of the tools that we've used that come in handy are like your body working tools.
Sorry, son.
They're kind of like a cheese grater. The benefit to them is you can carve and the plaster goes through them without filling in the tool. Yeah, self-cleaning.
And you can also smooth out quite readily with the piece. Also, you take areas where you want to knock off big hunks of plaster, you can. But still, it leaves a groove so that if you want to come back and add plaster, you've got a good tooth to go into it. So this isn't the final surface, so to speak. I mean, it takes it down quite a ways. It makes a real nice way to shape, and you can get nice, smooth flowing lines. You know, it's gonna. This is one thing I wanted to have: is nice, smooth flowing lines, not static lines. And I think it's going to just be. Each one of these pieces I want to be a fantastic piece in itself, so that if you just took the piece itself and put it out, you would have an interesting piece. And I think this little guy would be interesting in any kind of a fountain, whether it's Frankenmuth or anywhere. But to me, the fun is, you know, you creating something that lives, and I think this whole sculpture is going to live when we get done with it.
And the one thing you find out about sculptures is, and difference to two-dimensional art, is it takes on a different shape from each side. It's art that you can look through and look around and look from above and down below. It usually has a lot more interesting angles than just a flat two-dimensional piece of art.
One thing that's nice too, you can work with one tool for a while, and you get tired of working with that one, you can move over to another tool, which is what it's neat. These are probably in this bucket of files right here, all different sizes, shapes, from the large large files, which is one like this, down to maybe little delicate files like this we use them for a little finer detail. But there's probably somewhere in the area of $300 to $400 worth of files there. So it takes quite a little bit of equipment just to work on a piece and do it properly. These files are, every edge is a cutting edge. Whether it's this edge, this edge, this edge, it's all cutting edge. Some of them are curved, so that you can get into certain curved areas, and they're all made with the sculptor in mind. Well, you see here what I've got here is a little photo of the original little marquee that, of the sculpture, and then here's a line sketch to kind of give you an idea of what the action will be involved. The little boys running around, a little boy blowing bubbles, a little girl with a dog chasing her, and this is what the whole fountain will be structured around. I've made a couple of little sketches here of the little boy and little girl's outfit. Now they don't mean a lot to anyone else, but to the sculptor they give me a little bit of an idea. Sometimes, you know, you have to do several pieces. Oh, it's going to blow away back there. Let's put it over here. Several sketches to give yourself a little bit of an idea. For instance, you know, we want to make the figures interesting, and so, for instance, on the faces, you know, a lot of times you don't lock yourself into these, but it gives you an idea for the feel of what you want to do. And whether if you want to make, like, okay, say a little girl here, we want to have her have pleasant look, nice big eyes, type thing. Her hair blowing, and just in general, a happy little girl, a little Bavarian girl. So we come in with a general idea of what we want, and then get the sketch made up. And this is very loose at this point. I'm not trying to draw exact details, because in sculpture, what happens, you find out you do a thing on a two-dimensional basis, and then you go in and you're thinking three-dimensional when you're really actually doing the piece. So you have to be careful that you don't lock yourself in so much that you say, oh gee, I've got to do it just like the drawing. But you want a pleasant-looking little face on your girls. Okay, I'll put some sort of little hat on her here. Maybe we might have pigtails blowing. And her collar, back of her neck. You always want to remember to kind of keep it nice and flowing on these things. But anyway, this gives you an idea, just a real quick rough sketch of what the type of little figure that we might want to do on the face. And then all the time what this is just constantly trying to think in terms of a very cute little face. We don't want her to look old. We want to look very pleasant, very sweet, very young and innocent. So that kind of gives you an idea. And of course, I usually sign these because sometimes somebody might want them. kind of gives you an idea of how we think along trying to get the flow of something. It doesn't take long to make these little sketches when we make these little sketches, and sometimes they can serve just really well in the end product. So that's why I do the sketches, and there'll be a lot of them end up in Frankenmuth.
Dad's killing me up here.
swung around this way. To kind of give you an idea. And we put a lot of plastic in there, plastic stuff, working on the other, overlaying at it. I'm having this socks on. That's good.
A lot of detail in that.
You have to. When you first start out, you have a lot of work to do. Building a piece of stuff. And this will go. Just, oh, I had it over that. Here, just right here. I did that. Yeah, here. I had that over there for a small girl. I used to be, put it on the plastic, it tied it down, I just couldn't mark it. So I had it over there, so I didn't touch it. We can put out a real cloud of white smoke as we feel like it. You know, grinding and everything. The fun is just
How many figures are there altogether?
There's 5. There's 4 of them here, but there's another one. Don't come up on my street. The legs are really rough right now. They'll be smoother. Now, see, I could go back and fill areas like this, and smooth them all down, and carve the fingers in better, and then the ears, and the nose, the mouth needs work on, the eyeballs, and then you can kind of see the head up here on this one. It's from the other head. This one texture on the head. Now, what happens when you put a tool like this? Get a little gloss going on, and there's this is just more. A little bit, yeah. And it's also like this arm here, like this girl over here. We've got on this arm here, correct, yeah. And here we'll be grinding down here. So this arm, we'll go over here. So I see you looking here. That's a mold. So you put up front. Mine was that big ass.
This has got some detail in it.
Oh yeah. Well, it's just like this is that. That's kind of like
Your head's inside the
He's taking our picture. You got to take his picture.
Now Charlie's got to move over about toward Andy. Yeah. Over toward Andy. Yeah, there you go.
oh yeah, I got a copy of that. I want to get one.
I'm going to try to get the recordings, but
No, on her ring, what kind of flowers?
Well, we got that one thing.
4 weeks spot. You know what that temp on?
We got the hat stand also has
Cash is in a big block, normal first.
No, what we did is we took like, well, I don't think we have any out here, but yeah, it's all metal rod like this inside.
Yeah.
And we welded the structure all together, the inside structure, and then wrapped it with this chicken wire.
And then just started
Yeah.
piling it on. It wasn't
Yeah.
like you were actually doing blocks on it.
Right. And we took like the frames actually had a figurative shape.
Shape.
Yeah.
See, Charlie, the reason I wanted to read down is because she had said how important it is for the hair when having little blisters along over the hat. It looks so, you see how the little blister goes on like that. And I think that's a good thing we thought was very important in putting the figures together.
All those up there now.
You don't want the global company to see that. Here's that. Oh, great.
What is this?
That article I had in the paper about the he works in the newspaper, so he's laminating.
That's right on the front page.
Well, I said when they have the dedication, I'm gonna try and see if they can't tie it into a travel article.
Yeah, because they have a feature every Sunday in the paper on travel, and they have Frankenmuth.
I had there's a gal up there at work.
Art for years and just got into sculpture primarily about 10 years ago, and it's just kind of progressed to larger and larger pieces, and we got some more monumental piece now. About a year and a half ago, I was talking with the people in Frankenmuth, Michigan, and they wanted to put up a fountain, a monumental fountain, and they wanted something to do with the flavor of the town, which is a Bavarian town. They're all about 4.5 foot tall, which is life size. They depict children running around a maypole. One of the figures is of a little boy that he's going to be blowing bubbles through one of the little bubble oars. And he'll be barefooted, he'll be standing in the water, in the fountain, and we're going to hook him up so that he will actually blow bubbles. For instance, inside this figure here, there's a welded metal armature, and on top of the welded metal, we wrapped poultry wire, and on top of that, we dipped burlap into plaster and wrapped that around the metal armature very closely. Then we started building up, and we got the plaster where we wanted it, into the shape we wanted it, and from there on we've taken files, rasps, grinders, whatever it takes to form the figure in the way we wanted it. And this up just a little bit. This will be a very highly visible fountain because the city of Frankenmuth has something like 3 million visitors a year. It will get viewed and probably photographed just tons of times, which pleases us.
Finally, local artist Larry Weatherholt, known for his Timber Doodles cartoon in the local paper and his now shop at the Franklin Mall, has completed another masterpiece.
Weatherholt, along with his sons Eric and Steve, have created life-size figurines for the Michigan city of Frankenmuth. On Sunday, the figurines will travel north to their new home where they'll be bronzed. WAND's chief photographer Dave Olson gives us a look.
She thought it was great because I've been in art for years and just got into sculpture primarily about 10 years ago, and it's just kind of progressed to larger and larger pieces, and we got into a more monumental piece now. About a year and a half ago, I was talking with the people in Frankenmuth, Michigan, and They wanted to put up a fountain, a monumental fountain, and they wanted something to do with the flavor of the town, which is a Bavarian town. They're all about 4.5 foot tall, which is life size. They depict children running around a maypole. One of the figures is of a little boy that he's going to be blowing bubbles through one of the little bubble blowers. And he'll be barefoot and he'll be standing in the water in the fountain. And we're going to hook him up so that he will actually blow bubbles. For instance, inside this figure here, there's a welded metal armature. And on top of the welded metal, we wrapped poultry wire. And on top of that, we dipped burlap into plaster and wrapped that around the metal armature very closely. Then we started building up until we got the plaster where we wanted it, into the shape we wanted it. And from there on, we've taken files, rasps, grinders, whatever it takes to form the figure in the way we want it. And this up just a little bit. This will be a very highly visible fountain because the city of Frankenmuth has something like 3 million visitors a year. It will get viewed and probably photographed just tons of times, which pleases us.